The great hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with noise from dozens of alien voices. Jake Morrison sat in his chair and watched the chaos unfold around him. He had been Earth's ambassador to the Council for 12 years now, and he had seen this same scene play out many times before. The aliens loved to argue about humans, and today was no different. The Zephyrian delegate stood up from his crystal chair. His name was Veltar, and his whole body looked like it was made of blue glass. He pointed one long finger at the human section of the hall. "These creatures from Earth are too violent," he said in his high voice. "They fight wars all the time. They cannot be trusted with our technology. They are too primitive to sit with civilized beings like us." Katie Sullivan shifted in her seat next to Morrison. She wore her military uniform with pride, even though the aliens always stared at it with disgust. Katie had fought in 3 wars, but all of them had been to protect human colonies from alien raiders who attacked first. She had never started a fight, but she had finished plenty of them. Behind the human delegation sat Dr. Carl Murphy from the medical team. He had spent 5 years working with alien doctors to cure diseases that killed millions across the galaxy. Right now, his team was close to finding a cure for the Xerian plague that was killing entire alien worlds. But apparently that did not matter to the Council. The Altarian trade minister spoke next. His species looked like walking trees with too many arms. "Humans demand too much payment for their services," he complained. "They want fair trades instead of accepting what we offer them. This shows they are greedy and selfish." Morrison almost laughed at that. The Altarians had tried to pay humans with worthless metal scraps while demanding advanced technology in return. When humans asked for fair payment, they were called greedy. More aliens stood up to speak against humanity. The Corvani military leader complained that human peacekeeping forces were too effective and made other species look weak. The Meridian research director said human scientists asked too many questions and did not follow proper procedures. Every alien had something bad to say about the humans who had helped them for decades. Katie leaned over to Morrison and whispered, "They hate us for being good at what we do." Morrison nodded but said nothing. He had learned long ago that defending humanity in this hall was pointless. The aliens had made up their minds years ago, and nothing would change them. Finally, High Counselor Jexhai stood up. He was the leader of the council, and his species looked like giant snakes with arms. His people had been controlling galactic politics for thousands of years, and they did not like how humans were changing things. "We have heard enough," he said in his cold voice. "The council has made its decision." The hall went quiet. Even the translator machines stopped their constant humming. "Humanity is banned from the quantum communication network," Jexhai announced. "You will no longer have access to the hyperspace lane maps. All medical exchange programs with human doctors are ended immediately. All human colonies outside the Sol system must be abandoned within 1 standard year." Morrison felt Katie tense beside him. Dr. Murphy made a small sound of shock from behind them. The other humans in the delegation looked stunned, but Morrison was not surprised. He had seen this coming for months. The aliens were jealous of human success and afraid of human independence. They wanted humans to be grateful servants, not equal partners. The snake-like High Counselor continued speaking. "Humans have proven they cannot work with civilized species. They are too aggressive, too selfish, and too primitive. The galaxy will be safer without them." Morrison stood up slowly. The entire hall watched him, expecting the usual human response. They probably thought he would give an angry speech or beg for mercy or try to negotiate. That was what humans had done before when faced with alien prejudice. Instead, Morrison reached into his pocket and pulled out his personal communicator. He pressed a single button and spoke into it quietly. "Admiral Bennett, this is Morrison. Execute Protocol 7. The hall erupted in confused whispers. None of the aliens knew what Protocol 7 was, but they could tell it was important. Morrison closed his communicator and gathered his papers from the desk. Katie Sullivan stood up and did the same. Dr. Murphy and the rest of the human delegation followed their example. Without saying a word, Morrison walked toward the exit. His footsteps echoed in the suddenly quiet hall. Katie walked beside him, her head held high. The other humans followed in a single line. Not one human spoke. Not one human looked back. They simply walked out of the Galactic Council Hall in complete silence. Behind them, the aliens sat in shocked confusion. They had expected anger or begging or negotiation. They had not expected silence. They had not expected humans to simply accept the decision and leave. As the last human disappeared through the doorway, High Counselor Jexhai felt the first small touch of unease. Something was wrong about this reaction, but he could not figure out what. The humans were gone, and the galaxy would soon learn what that really meant. 3 months had passed since the humans walked out of the Galactic Council. Now Admiral Lisa Bennett stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the largest evacuation in galactic history unfold before her eyes. Thousands of human ships moved through space in perfect formation, carrying entire populations away from worlds they had called home for decades. The UES Horizon was the biggest ship in the human fleet, and from its command center, Bennett coordinated the movement of millions of people. She had gray hair and tired eyes, but her voice never wavered as she gave orders to ship captains across dozens of star systems. Transport Group 7, you are clear for hyperspace jump to Rally Point Delta, she said into her communicator. Group 8, maintain formation and wait for the medical ships to catch up. On her main screen, she watched the colony ship New Angeles prepare to leave Kepler Prime. The planet had been humanity's first major settlement outside Earth's solar system, and now Captain Tony Rodriguez was loading the last families onto his ship. Rodriguez had been born on Kepler Prime 40 years ago. His parents had been among the first colonists to arrive, and he had grown up thinking the planet would always be his home. Now he stood in the cargo bay and watched children say goodbye to the only world they had ever known. This is wrong, Rodriguez said to his first officer, Linda Price. We built this place from nothing. We turned a dead rock into a garden world. These people have lived here their whole lives, and now we have to leave because some aliens decided we do not belong. Price nodded as she checked the passenger manifest. Orders are orders, Captain. Besides, Admiral Bennett says this is not really about surrender. She says we are doing something different. Rodriguez looked out the window at the city they were leaving behind. Human engineers had built those towers and bridges. Human farmers had planted those crops and parks. Human doctors had built the hospitals, and human teachers had built the schools. Now it would all be left to the aliens who had never wanted humans there in the first place. On the mining station above Vega 7th, Dr. Carl Murphy was packing up his medical research. His team had been working day and night for 2 years to find a cure for the Xerion plague. The disease had already killed billions of aliens across 12 different species, and Murphy's team was closer to a solution than any other group in the galaxy. Doctor, what should we do with the test samples? Asked his assistant, Dr. Amy Foster. She held a container of experimental medicine that might have saved countless alien lives. Murphy looked at the samples for a long moment. He could leave them behind for the alien researchers to continue the work, but he knew they did not understand the complex processes his team had developed. Without human guidance, the research would die with the samples. Pack them up, he said finally. All of it. Every sample, every data file, every piece of equipment. If the Council wants us gone, then our work goes with us. Similar scenes played out across hundreds of worlds. Human engineers packed up their construction plans. Human farmers took their crop genetics and soil treatment formulas. Human teachers gathered their educational programs. Human peacekeepers collected their weapons and security protocols. The galaxy's alien species watched the evacuation with mixed feelings. Some were happy to see the humans go. They had always resented human success and efficiency, but others began to worry as they saw what was leaving with the humans. On the trade route between Altair and Proxima, merchant ships suddenly found themselves under attack by pirate fleets. For 20 years, human patrol ships had kept these routes safe. Captain Jake Morrison's son, Lieutenant Dan Morrison, had led many of those patrols from his ship, the Guardian. Now the Guardian was gone, heading toward human space with the rest of the evacuation fleet. The alien merchants who had complained about human protection fees suddenly realized how much they needed that protection. Captain Nina Foster of the merchant vessel Star Dancer sent desperate messages to the Galactic Council. "We have been attacked 3 times this week," she reported. "Where are the human patrols? When will they come back to protect us?" The Council's response was always the same. Humanity had been a disruptive influence, and the galaxy was better off without them. Other species would take over human duties in time, but time was something many alien worlds did not have. On the agricultural planet Helios Prime, the irrigation systems that human engineer Marcus Webb had designed were starting to fail. Webb had spent 15 years learning about the planet's unique soil and climate. His irrigation systems were perfectly designed for local conditions, but the alien farmers who remained did not understand how they worked. When the systems broke down, the aliens tried to fix them using their own technology, but their methods did not work on the human-designed equipment. Crops began to die, and food shortages started to spread. In the galactic core, the research station on Taurus Station faced a critical emergency. The station used exotic matter to power its research equipment, and the containment fields that kept the exotic matter stable were failing. Dr. Helen Carter and her human team had been the only ones who understood how to maintain those fields. Chapter. Alien scientists who remained at the station tried to read the technical manuals that the humans had left behind. But the manuals were written in human technical language, and many of the concepts were too advanced for non-human minds to understand quickly. As the containment fields grew weaker, the station's director realized they had less than a week before. A catastrophic failure would destroy the entire facility. He sent emergency messages to the human fleet, begging Dr. Carter to return and help them. But the human ships were already too far away to respond in time. The pattern repeated across the galaxy. Aliens discovered that they had grown dependent on human knowledge and skills without realizing it. Humans had taken on the difficult jobs, the dangerous assignments, and the complex problems that other species preferred to avoid. Now those humans were gone and the problems remained. Admiral Bennett read the reports from across the galaxy as her fleet traveled toward its new home beyond the galactic rim. Alien worlds were struggling with equipment failures, security breaches, and technical problems they could not solve. "How many requests for assistance have we received?" she asked her communications officer. 47 official requests from planetary governments, came the reply. Hundreds of unofficial messages from individuals and organizations. They all want us to come back and fix their problems. Bennett shook her head. "And what does the Council say about these requests?" "The Council maintains that humanity was expelled for good reasons and that other species will adapt to fill the gaps." Bennett looked out at the stars ahead of them. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of the galaxy, lay new worlds and new opportunities. The humans would build something better than what they had left behind. Behind them, the galaxy was learning the true cost of prejudice. 6 months had passed since the last human ship disappeared beyond the galactic rim, and the cracks were starting to show everywhere. Captain Nina Foster gripped the controls of her merchant vessel Star Dancer as another pirate ship appeared on her sensors. This was the 4th attack this week, and her cargo of medical supplies was desperately needed on 3 different alien worlds. "Where are the patrol ships?" her co-pilot asked as they tried to outrun the pirates. "There used to be human guardians on every major trade route." Foster shook her head grimly. "The guardians are gone, and nobody else wants the job. Too dangerous, too expensive, and the pay is terrible. For 20 years, human patrol fleets had kept the trade routes safe from pirates and raiders. They had done it efficiently and cheaply, asking only for basic supplies and fuel in return. The alien merchants had complained about even those small costs, calling humans greedy for asking for payment. Now those same merchants were learning what real greed looked like as pirate fleets demanded everything they carried. The Star Dancer barely escaped that day, but 12 other merchant ships were not so lucky. The pirates took their cargo, their credits, and sometimes their lives. Trade between star systems slowed to a crawl as merchant captains became afraid to travel the once-safe routes. On the agricultural world of Helios Prime, the situation had grown desperate. The irrigation systems that Marcus Webb had designed were failing one by one, and the alien engineers could not repair them. They had tried to contact Webb directly, offering him enormous sums of money to return and fix the systems, but there had been no response. Farm supervisor Klex High stood in what used to be a green field and watched his crops wither in the alien sun. His people were plant-like beings who understood growing things, but they had never needed to understand complex irrigation technology before the humans arrived. "The water pressure is wrong in Sector 7, his assistant reported. "The mineral balance is off in Sectors 12 through 15, and the whole Eastern District is getting too much salt in the water supply." Klex High had spent months trying to understand Webb's irrigation plans, but the human engineer had designed everything to work together in ways that seemed impossible. The water flow, the mineral content, the timing of the irrigation cycles, everything was connected in a complex system that only Webb truly understood. "Contact the Galactic Council again," Klex High ordered. "Tell them we need the human engineer back, or we will lose the entire harvest." But the Council's response was the same as always. Humanity had been expelled for good reasons, and the aliens would have to solve their own problems. In the Galactic Core, the research station on Taurus Station was facing its own crisis. The exotic matter containment fields were failing faster than anyone had predicted, and the alien scientists were running out of time to find a solution. Dr. Vexatar, the station's new director, stared at the readouts that showed containment field strength dropping by the hour. If the fields failed completely, the exotic matter would explode with enough force to destroy half the solar system. "Have we heard anything from the human fleet?" he asked his assistant. "No response to any of our messages," came the reply. "The humans seem to have disappeared completely." Dr. Helen Carter had been the leading expert on exotic matter containment in the galaxy. Her team had developed the specific techniques needed to keep the Taurus Station field stable, and they had been the only ones who truly understood how the system worked. Before leaving, Carter had tried to train alien replacements, but the concepts were too complex for most non-human minds to grasp quickly. The techniques required intuitive understanding of quantum physics that took human scientists years to develop. Now Vextar and his team had less than 72 hours to figure out what Carter had spent a decade perfecting, or watch their entire solar system die. The Zephyrian homeworld was facing a different kind of crisis. Their beautiful crystal cities had always been vulnerable to attack, but they had relied on human security forces for protection. The Zephyrians were artists and philosophers, not warriors, and their own military had never developed beyond ceremonial functions. Counselor Veltar, who had been one of the loudest voices calling for human expulsion, now stood in his crystal tower and watched enemy ships approach his world. The hegemony, a militaristic species from the Outer Rim, had decided that Zephyr Prime would make a perfect base for their expansion into the core worlds. "Where are our defenders?" Veltar demanded of his military advisor. "We sent messages to the Council asking for protection," the advisor replied nervously. "They said other species would take over human security duties, but no one has volunteered for the job." Veltar watched the enemy ships draw closer and felt fear creep into his crystalline heart. For 3 centuries, his people had lived in peace. creating beautiful art and music while humans handled the ugly business of war and defense. Now the humans were gone, and the hegemony ships were preparing to bombard his helpless world. Similar problems erupted across the galaxy. The Corvani shipyards, which had been the premier vessel manufacturer for decades, was struggling to maintain quality without human metallurgical expertise. Their ships were becoming unreliable, and customers were canceling orders. The Meridian Research Institute could not keep their quantum computers running without the human technicians who understood the delicate calibration procedures. Research projects that had been running for years were shutting down one by one. Even worse, the diseases that human doctors had been fighting were spreading unchecked. The Xerion plague that Dr. Carl Murphy's team had been close to curing had now infected 3 new species. Without human medical knowledge, alien doctors were helpless to stop it. Dr. Alex Morgan monitored the galactic communication networks from his new laboratory aboard the human colony ship New Horizons. As the fleet's chief intelligence officer, it was his job to keep track of what was happening in the galaxy they had left behind. "The situation is deteriorating faster than we predicted," he reported to Admiral Bennett during their weekly briefing. "The Taurus station crisis could go critical within days. The trade route piracy is up by 400%. And we are getting desperate messages from dozens of worlds asking for help." Bennett studied the reports with a grim expression. "Any word from the Galactic Council?" "They are maintaining their position that humanity was correctly expelled and that other species will adapt to fill our roles," Morgan replied. "But privately, some council members are starting to panic." Bennett looked out at the human fleet, traveling through the dark space between galaxies. Behind them, the civilization they had helped build for decades was falling apart. Ahead lay unknown regions, filled with new possibilities. "They made their choice," she said quietly. "They decided they did not need us. Now, they get to live with that decision." The Admiral turned away from the window and walked back to her command center. There was work to do preparing humanity's new home, and she refused to waste time feeling sorry for the aliens who had cast them out. But even as she worked, the distress calls from the galaxy grew more desperate each day. The silence from the human fleet was becoming more ominous than any threat they had ever made. A full year had passed since humanity vanished into the dark space beyond the galactic rim, and the galaxy was tearing itself apart. High Counselor HFY coiled his serpentine body around his command throne and watched the emergency reports flood in from across civilized space. The Nexus Trade Compact, which had regulated galactic commerce for 3 centuries, had collapsed completely. Without human mediators to resolve disputes and human patrol fleets to enforce agreements, the major trading species had turned on each other like hungry predators. "The hegemony has seized control of the Vega shipping lanes," reported the Council's military advisor, a 4-armed Corvani named General Zartek. "They are demanding tribute from all vessels that want to pass through their territory." HFY's cold eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the hegemony's expanding territory. The militaristic species had been contained for decades by careful human diplomacy and the threat of human intervention. Now they were conquering entire star systems, and no one could stop them. "What about the other military powers?" HFY asked. "Surely the Altarians or the Meridians can challenge them." Zartek shook his forehead sadly. "The Altarian fleet cannot function without human-designed targeting systems. The Meridian ships keep breaking down because they do not have human engineers to maintain them. Half the galaxy's military forces are useless without human support." On his homeworld of Zephyr Prime, Counselor Veltar watched the beautiful crystal. Spires of his capital city burn under hegemony bombardment. The enemy had arrived 3 days ago, and the Zephyrian Defense Force had lasted exactly 6 hours against professional soldiers. Veltar had spent his entire life creating delicate crystal sculptures and writing poetry about the beauty of peace. His people had been artists and philosophers for thousands of years, content to let others handle violence while they focused on higher pursuits. The humans had been perfect for that role. They were good at fighting, but they also understood the value of protecting beauty and culture. Human soldiers had guarded Zephyrian art galleries and concert halls, keeping them safe from those who would destroy what they could not understand. Now the galleries were in flames, and centuries of irreplaceable art was being reduced to molten glass. "Send another message to the human fleet," Veltar ordered his assistant as explosions shook his crystal tower. "Offer them anything they want, our entire treasury, our most valuable artworks, anything. Just ask them to come back and save us." But like all the other messages sent to human space, this one vanished into silence. The human fleet had disappeared so completely that many aliens were starting to wonder if they still existed. The economic collapse was spreading faster than anyone had predicted. The Corvani shipyards, once the galaxy's premier manufacturer, had laid off 80% of their workers. Without access to human metallurgical techniques, their ships were inferior products that no one wanted to buy. Master engineer Tokhar stood in his empty factory and remembered the day when human technician Steve Rogers had first shown him how to properly alloy quantum steel. Rogers had been patient and friendly, always willing to share his knowledge with alien colleagues. "We could have learned everything from them if we had treated them better," Tokhar said to his remaining assistant. "Now we are going backward, while they take all that knowledge to the stars." The assistant nodded sadly. "I heard that some human engineers offered to sell us their techniques through intermediaries, but the price they want is too high." Tokhar laughed bitterly. "Too high? They want the same wages we pay our own top engineers, plus respect and equal treatment. A year ago, we called those demands unreasonable. Now we would pay 10 times that much to get them back." On the research station orbiting Proxima Centauri, Dr. Linda Hayes faced the collapse of her life's work. She had been studying quantum biology for 30 years, trying to understand how life could exist in the strange conditions near black holes. Her research had depended on quantum computers that only human technicians knew how to maintain. When the humans left, Dr. Hayes had been confident that she could keep the machines running herself. She had been wrong. "The quantum processors are desyncing again," her research assistant reported. "We have lost another week's worth of data." Hayes stared at the quantum computer that had once been the most advanced research tool in the galaxy. Human technician Gary Mitchell had maintained it perfectly for 8 years, keeping it running at peak efficiency through techniques he had never fully explained to his alien colleagues. "Did we ever ask Gary to teach us his methods?" Hayes asked. Her assistant looked uncomfortable. "The department head said it was not necessary. He said humans were just technicians, and we did not need to learn their simple maintenance procedures." Now those simple procedures were beyond the understanding of the galaxy's most brilliant alien scientists. The medical crisis was worst of all. Dr. Carl Murphy's research into the Xerion plague had been abandoned when the human medical team left, and the disease was now spreading to new species every month. Dr. Vextor, the Altarian physician who had taken over Murphy's research, stared at the human data files with growing despair. Murphy's team had been using treatment techniques that seemed simple on the surface, but required deep understanding of human medical philosophy. They were not just treating the disease, Vextor realized as he studied the files. They were treating the whole organism, considering factors that we never even measured. Human doctors had always seemed primitive to their alien colleagues. They relied too much on intuition and not enough on pure technology. But now that the humans were gone, alien patients were dying from diseases that human doctors could have cured easily. Admiral Bennett read the weekly intelligence reports in her private quarters aboard the New Horizons. Dr. Alex Morgan had compiled data from across the galaxy, and the picture was even worse than she had expected. 17 different wars have started since we left, she said to her chief of staff, Colonel Dave Mitchell. The death toll is approaching 1 billion beings across all species. Mitchell nodded grimly. The requests for assistance are getting more desperate every day. Some alien governments are offering us entire star systems if we will come back and restore order. Bennett walked to her window and looked out at the human colony ships traveling through intergalactic space. Each ship carried thousands of people who had been forced to abandon homes they had built with their own hands. "They called us primitive," she said quietly. "Too violent to be civilized, too aggressive to be trusted with advanced technology." She turned back to Mitchell. "And now their civilization is falling apart because they drove away the only species that knew how to hold it together." Bennett sat back down at her desk and picked up the latest message from the Galactic Council. It was signed by 12 different species leaders, all begging humanity to return and restore peace to the galaxy. She deleted the message without reading it. Outside her window, the stars of humanity's new home grew brighter with each passing day. Behind them, the galaxy they had left continued its slide into chaos, learning too late the price of prejudice and pride. The humans had walked away in silence, and their silence was proving more powerful than any weapon they had ever built. 2 years had passed since humanity disappeared beyond the galactic rim, and what remained of galactic civilization was dying. President Sandra Lee stood in the observation deck of the mobile capital ship New Earth and watched her people build something magnificent in the darkness between galaxies. Human colony ships had linked together to form massive space cities. Engineers who had once maintained alien infrastructure now designed wonders that surpassed anything the galaxy had ever seen. Scientists who had been called primitive by alien colleagues were making discoveries that would have seemed like magic to their former critics. "Madam President," her aide interrupted her thoughts. "Admiral Bennett is here with the daily intelligence report." Lee turned from the window as Bennett entered with her usual stack of data tablets. The Admiral looked tired but determined, her gray hair now showing streaks of white from the stress of leading humanity through its greatest exodus. "The situation continues to deteriorate," Bennett reported. "The Xerian plague has now spread to 19 species. The death toll has reached 12 billion beings across 47 worlds." Lee closed her eyes at the numbers. Dr. Carl Murphy had been so close to finding a cure when they were forced to leave. His research could have saved all those lives if the aliens had simply treated humanity with basic respect. "Any progress on their end?" Lee asked. Bennett shook her head. "The alien medical teams cannot replicate Murphy's work. They keep trying to use purely technological solutions for what Murphy understood was a biological and psychological problem. They are treating symptoms while Murphy was treating causes." Through the window, Lee could see Dr. Murphy's new laboratory on the research ship Discovery. His team had continued their work in exile and had already developed cures for 6 different diseases that plagued the galaxy. But those cures would stay with humanity until the galaxy learned to value human contributions. "What about the economic situation?" Lee asked. "Complete collapse in the core worlds," Bennett replied. "The Corvani shipyards closed permanently last week. The Altarian banking system failed when they could not maintain their quantum encryption without human cryptographers. Even basic interstellar communication is breaking down as the relay stations fail one by one." Bennett brought up a holographic display showing the galaxy's communication network. Red zones marked areas where the quantum relay stations had gone dark, cutting entire regions off from galactic civilization. "The irony is incredible," Bennett continued. "They expelled us for being too primitive, but their advanced technology only worked because humans were maintaining it." General Pete Harrison, head of Human Defense Forces, joined the briefing with his own grim reports. His weathered face showed the strain of defending the human fleet from increasingly desperate alien attacks. "We have had 37 attempted raids on our perimeter this month," Harrison reported. "Some are refugees seeking asylum, which we grant after proper screening. But others are military forces trying to capture human ships and force our people to return." Lee frowned. "They are trying to enslave us now?" "Several alien governments have passed laws declaring that humans are too valuable to be allowed independence," Harrison explained. They want to capture our engineers, doctors, and scientists and force them to work for alien interests. The president felt anger rise in her chest. The same aliens who had called humans primitive were now so desperate for human knowledge that they were willing to commit acts of piracy and slavery to get it back. "How are our defenses holding?" she asked. Harrison smiled grimly. "Human military. Technology has advanced significantly since we left the galaxy. Our weapons are now 2 generations ahead of anything the aliens possess. Every raid has been repelled easily, but the attempts are getting more frequent." On the bridge of the research vessel New Horizons, Dr. Alex Morgan monitored communications from across the galaxy and compiled intelligence reports that painted a picture of complete civilizational collapse. The Nexus station, which had served as the Galactic Government Center for over a millennium, was barely functioning. Half the station was without power after a cascade failure in the quantum generators that only human engineers had truly understood. High Counselor Zhexhai had died in the station collapse, along with 3 other council members. The remaining alien leaders were arguing over who should take control, but none of them had solutions for the problems destroying their civilization. "The Meridian system has declared independence from the galaxy," Morgan reported to President Lee during their weekly briefing. "They say they cannot wait for galactic government to fix itself while their people starve." Lee nodded sadly. "And the refugee situation?" "Getting worse every day. We now have over 2 million alien refugees in our temporary camps, and more arrive. Every week, they are fleeing war zones, plague outbreaks, and economic collapse." The human fleet had set up refugee processing stations at the edge of their territory, carefully screening alien arrivals to separate genuine refugees from spies or raiders. Those who passed screening were given temporary sanctuary, basic food, and medical care, and the chance to start new lives in human space. Many of the aliens were shocked by their treatment. They had expected humans to be vengeful after their expulsion, but instead found themselves welcomed and cared for by the same species their governments had rejected. Dr. Amy Foster worked in the main refugee medical center, treating alien patients with diseases that their own doctors could no longer cure. She had been Dr. Murphy's assistant during the plague research, and now she used that knowledge to save lives her former alien colleagues could not. "This Zephyrian child has a simple case of quantum flu," she explained to her human medical team. "Back in the galaxy, this would be a death sentence because the alien doctors do not understand how to balance quantum medications with biological systems. For us, it is a routine treatment." The child's crystal-like body had been flickering and fading when his refugee family arrived. Now, after 2 days of human medical care, he was playing with other refugee children in the station's recreation area. His father, a former counselor named Veltar, watched his son play and felt shame burn in his crystalline heart. This was the same species he had condemned as primitive and violent just 2 years ago. In the galaxy's outer rim, the hegemony continued their conquest of former council territories. Their military fleets faced no organized resistance as they seized world after world. Commander Kextar of the Hegemony Third Fleet stood on his flagship's bridge and surveyed his latest conquest. The mining world below had surrendered without a fight, its defenders unable to maintain their weapons without human support. "This is almost too easy," his tactical officer commented. "These core world species cannot fight without human assistance." Kextar nodded. "The humans were the only thing keeping this galaxy stable. Without them, we can take whatever we want." But even the hegemony was starting to face problems. Their own technology was failing as supply chains collapsed and manufacturing centers shut down. The galaxy they were conquering was becoming less valuable with each passing day. President Lee received the final intelligence report of the day in her private office. The numbers were staggering. Over 50 billion aliens had died in the 2 years since humanity's expulsion. Entire species faced extinction from disease, war, or economic collapse. "We could stop this," her defense secretary said quietly. 1. Broadcast from Admiral Bennett, and half the galaxy would surrender immediately just to get our help back. Lee stared out at the stars of their new home. Humanity had built something beautiful in their exile. A civilization based on cooperation, respect, and the free exchange of knowledge. They were making contact with species from other galaxies, forming alliances that the old council could never have imagined. They made their choice, she said finally. They decided we were too primitive to deserve equality, too violent to be trusted, too different to be accepted. She turned back to her desk and the reports of alien suffering. Now they live with the consequences of that choice. We will not abandon our principles to save those who abandoned us. Outside her window, the lights of New Earth continued to shine. In the darkness, a beacon of human achievement that the galaxy would never see again. 3 years had passed since the humans walked away in silence, and now a small diplomatic ship approached the border of human space. Ambassador Jake Morrison, now serving as humanity's Secretary of External Affairs, sat in a simple conference room aboard the civilian station Haven and waited for the delegation that had once expelled his people from galactic civilization. The aliens who entered the room were broken shadows of their former selves. Counselor Veltar's crystalline form was cracked and dim, his once brilliant blue light now flickering weakly like a dying star. Fleet Admiral Zartek bore deep scars across his forearms, wounds from fighting pirates with weapons his people could no longer maintain. Behind them came Dr. Nexhai, the Altarian medical researcher who had taken over humanity's plague research. His tree-like form was withered and bent, aged by the stress of watching billions die from diseases he could not cure. Morrison studied each face carefully, remembering the arrogance they had displayed 3 years ago when they voted to cast humanity out of civilized space. Now they sat before him with the desperate humility of beings who had learned the true cost of their prejudice. Ambassador Morrison, Veltar began, his voice barely audible through the failing translator device. We have come to... He paused, struggling with words that his pride had never allowed him to speak. We have come to surrender. Morrison waited, in silence, just as he had when he walked out of that council chamber years ago. The art of negotiation had taught him that silence could be more powerful than any words. Zartek leaned forward with his remaining functional arms. The galaxy is dying without humanity. We did not understand how much we depended on your knowledge, your mediation, your... He struggled with the concept. Your humanity itself. Dr. Nexhai spoke next, his voice filled with the pain of a healer who had failed to heal. 60 billion beings have died from diseases your Dr. Murphy could have cured easily. The Xerion plague alone has wiped out 3 entire species. We tried to continue his work, but we could not understand the connections he saw between mind, body, and spirit. Morrison finally spoke, his voice calm and measured. You did not just exile us, Counselor Veltar. You called us primitive animals. You said we were too violent for civilized society, too aggressive to be trusted with advanced technology. Veltar's crystalline form flickered with shame. We were fools. We were jealous of your abilities and afraid of your independence. We wanted servants, not equals. And now? Morrison asked. Now we offer unconditional surrender, Zartek said formally. Full restoration of human citizenship, expanded territories, representation on all major councils, whatever you demand. We will pay any price, accept any terms, give you anything. You want? Morrison stood and walked to the viewport, where he could see the thriving human colony spread across dozens of linked space stations. Ships moved between platforms in perfect coordination, carrying families to new homes and scientists to research facilities that surpassed anything the galaxy had ever built. We have been busy these past 3 years, Morrison said, gesturing toward the view. We have made contact with species from 3 other galaxies. We have formed the Intergalactic Cooperation Alliance with beings your council never imagined existed. He turned back to face the delegation. We have built cities in dark space that are more advanced than anything in your core worlds. Our technology has advanced beyond what you thought possible. Our medicine can now cure diseases that do not even exist in your galaxy yet. The alien delegates sat in stunned silence as Morrison continued. We have created a civilization based on mutual respect, where knowledge is shared freely and all species are valued for their unique contributions. Veltar made a sound that might have been weeping if crystals could cry. Please, he whispered. My people are starving. Our homeworld's ecosystem is collapsing without your agricultural expertise. My children are dying from diseases your doctors could cure with simple treatments. Morrison felt a touch of the old compassion that had made him a diplomat, but he also remembered the day his own children had cried when forced to abandon the only home they had ever known. You made a critical error in your calculations, he said quietly. You assumed we needed you more than you needed us. You believed your advanced technology and ancient wisdom made you superior to primitive humanity. Dr. Nexhai looked up with desperate hope. But you will help us. Surely. Humans are compassionate beings. You would not let innocents suffer for the mistakes of their leaders. Morrison walked back to his chair and sat down, studying each alien face carefully. We are indeed compassionate. That is why we have accepted over 5 million alien refugees into our space. We have given them homes, medical care, education, and opportunities they could never have had in your collapsing civilization. He leaned forward. But compassion does not mean accepting abuse. We tried for decades to work as equals with your species. We offered partnership, cooperation, and mutual benefit. In return, we received contempt, exploitation, and eventual exile. The room fell silent, except for the soft hum of the station's life support systems. Outside the viewport, human children played in zero-gravity parks while their parents worked, in laboratories that were advancing science at an incredible pace. However, Morrison continued, and the aliens looked up with sudden hope. Humanity is not vengeful. We will consider a proposal for limited reintegration, but it will be on our terms. Veltar leaned forward eagerly. Any terms, anything you ask. Morrison activated a holographic display that showed the current state of the galaxy. Red zones marked areas of war, disease, and economic collapse. First, complete governmental restructuring. The council system that allowed prejudice and exploitation must be replaced with true democratic representation for all species. Zartek nodded frantically. Agreed. Completely agreed. Second, reparations. Not just to humanity, but to all species your policies have harmed. The refugees in our space deserve compensation for the homes and lives they lost. Of course, Dr. Nexhai said. Whatever we can afford to pay. Morrison's expression hardened. Third, and most importantly, guaranteed rights for all species. No more calling others primitive or unworthy. No more exploitation of those who are different. True equality, backed by enforceable laws. The aliens exchanged glances. This was the hardest demand, requiring them to abandon millennia of species superiority and accept all beings as equals. And if we agree to these terms? Veltar asked quietly. Morrison stood again and moved toward the door. Then we will discuss the possibility of sharing some of our medical knowledge to help with the plague crisis. We might consider providing limited security assistance to stop the worst of the wars. He paused at the doorway. But understand this clearly. If we return, it will not be as your saviors coming back to fix your mistakes. It will be as equals in a new galactic order, or not at all. The alien delegates sat in stunned realization as Morrison continued. You have 7 days to prepare a formal proposal addressing every point I have mentioned. If your offer meets our standards and shows genuine commitment to change, We will begin negotiations. Morrison opened the door, then looked back one final time. The galaxy had its chance to embrace diversity and cooperation decades ago. Instead, it chose pride, prejudice, and the comfortable lie that some species were better than others. He stepped toward the corridor, then paused. The silence has served us well these past 3 years. We have built something beautiful in that silence, something your galaxy has never seen. As the human Secretary of External Affairs walked away, the alien delegates finally understood the magnitude of what they had lost. Humanity had not just left the galaxy, they had taken the future with them. Now, getting that future back would require admitting that the species they had called primitive was, in fact, the most advanced civilization any of them had ever encountered. The question was whether their pride would finally allow them to pay that price. The silence stretched on as the aliens contemplated a choice that would determine whether their civilizations lived or died. Outside the viewport, the lights of human achievement continued to shine in the darkness, a testament to what could be accomplished when beings were free to reach their full potential. The humans had walked away in total silence, and now the galaxy would learn if that silence would ever be broken.